At 10 minutes to noon on the 4th of June, 2013, someone aboard the schooner Nina typed a text message into a satellite phone, somewhere in the middle of the Tasman Sea between New Zealand and Australia. The message read, "Thanks, storm sails shredded last night. Now bare poles, going 4 knots 310 degrees, will update course info at 6 p.m. It was a calm, practical message. It reported a problem, gave a position, gave a heading, and promised another update that evening. It was the kind of message an experienced crew sends when things are difficult but under control. The 6 p.m. update never came, and the noon message itself was never delivered. It sat, undelivered, in the satellite company's system, unseen by anyone, for weeks. By the time anyone read it, the 7 people aboard the Nina were already gone, and the message had become the last words anyone would ever receive from them. The Nina was not an ordinary boat. She was a legend. An 85-year-old staysail schooner, 59 feet long. Built in 1928, she was one of the most famous racing yachts in American history. She had been designed as a rule beater, built to win, and win she did. In 1928, her very first year, she won the transatlantic race from New York to Santander, Spain, and the King of Spain himself came out in his launch to congratulate her. That same year, she won the Fastnet race in the waters off Britain, the first American yacht ever to do so. She had once been the flagship of the New York Yacht Club. She won the Newport to Bermuda race in 1962. For decades, she was a queen of ocean racing, a beautiful, historic, fast wooden schooner with a list of victories few boats in the world could match. By 2013, the Nina was owned by an American named David Dyche, who had owned her for 25 years and thought of himself not as her owner, but as her steward. He loved the boat the way people love living things. He had spent years and untold amounts of money maintaining her, replacing her deck, her frames, her mast steps, the deep structural timbers in her bilge. He called the work a labor of love, unconditional, and said that after 23 years of the relationship, he had never been discouraged by even the most major setbacks. He kept her alive, this 85-year-old wooden racing machine, and he sailed her across oceans. In May of 2013, David Dyche was in New Zealand, preparing to sail the Nina across the Tasman Sea to Australia. Aboard with him would be his wife, Rosemary, 60 years old, and their son, David IV, who was 17 and was planning to leave the boat in Australia to go away to college in the United States. This was, in a sense, one of the last great voyages of his childhood. A final crossing with his parents before adult life took him in a different direction. Joining the family were 4 other crew members: Kyle Jackson, 27, Danielle Wright, 18, a British man named Matthew Wooten, 35, and Evi Nemeth, 73 years old, a retired University of Colorado professor and one of the most respected computer scientists in the world, a legendary figure in the field of systems administration, who in her retirement had become a passionate ocean sailor. 7 people in total, 6 Americans and 1 Briton. The youngest was 17. The oldest was 73. It is worth pausing on who these people were, because the Nina was not crewed by reckless thrill-seekers. Evi Nemeth was, in the world of computing, genuinely famous. She co-authored the reference books that generations of system administrators learned their craft from, texts so foundational they were simply known by the color of their covers. She had mentored countless students and was regarded with something close to reverence by people who managed the infrastructure of the early internet. In her 70s, instead of resting on that legacy, she had thrown herself into ocean sailing with the same curiosity and rigor she had brought to computer science. Danielle Wright was 18 at the very beginning of her adult life. Matthew Wooten was a 35-year-old Briton, an environmentalist who, by some accounts, had chosen to travel the world by sailboat specifically to avoid air travel and its carbon footprint, crossing oceans by wind rather than by jet. Kyle Jackson was 27, and the Dyche family, the three of them, were the heart of the boat, a father and mother and their teenage son, sharing one last great voyage together before the boy left for college and the family scattered into the next phase of their lives. The Tasman Sea is one of the most dangerous stretches of water a sailor can choose to cross. It lies between New Zealand and Australia, and it is notorious among sailors for its violence, especially in the southern winter. Dyche knew this. The crossing was about 1,200 to 1,500 miles, an 8 to 12-day voyage, and he knew it would be hard. On the days before departure, he wrote on his Facebook page that the Tasman Sea was shooting gales out like a machine gun, living up to its reputation. He wrote that there was no doubt they would be dancing with one or two of them. It was, in retrospect, a prophetic thing to write. He expected a tough passage. He had crossed oceans before. He believed the Nina and his crew could handle it. There was one complication that, in hindsight, may have set the whole tragedy in motion. Dyche had originally planned to leave New Zealand in February, well before the worst of the Tasman winter set in. But the Nina had suffered the loss of her main engine, and Dyche had decided to wait and repower her properly with a new one, a brand new 150 horsepower Cummins diesel. The repowering took time. By the time the Nina was ready, it was late May, 3 months later than he had originally intended, and the gentle autumn weather window had closed. The Tasman Sea had entered its brutal winter season, the season of one storm after another. The Nina sailed straight into it. She left Opua in the Bay of Islands on New Zealand's North Island on the 29th of May, 2013, bound for Newcastle, Australia. For the first few days, the voyage proceeded. Then the weather turned, exactly as Dyche had feared. By the 3rd of June, the Nina was in serious trouble. She was about 370 miles west-northwest of Cape Reinga, the northwestern tip of New Zealand's North Island, and she was in the middle of one of the brutal winter lows that march across the Tasman in early June. The conditions were ferocious: winds of 50 to 60 knots, seas of 25 feet, the kind of weather that pushes a boat and her crew to the absolute edge of what they can endure. That night, at around 11:50 p.m. on the 3rd of June, Evi Nemeth made a satellite phone call to a New Zealand meteorologist named Bob McDavitt, a weather router who advised cruising sailors crossing the Pacific. Nemeth's question was direct. "The weather has turned nasty," she said. "How do we get away from it?" McDavitt looked at the weather systems and gave her his best advice. "Head south," he told her, "and heave to, which means to stop the boat and ride out the storm in a stable defensive position, and brace for strong winds and high seas." He told them to wait it out. The next day, the 4th of June, McDavitt received a brief text message from the Nina. It read simply, "Any update for Nina? Evi." McDavitt advised them, again, to ride out the storm where they were for another day. And then, at 10 minutes to noon, came the other message. The one about the shredded storm sails and the bare poles. The one that promised an update at 6 p.m. The one that was never delivered and never followed. After that, silence. McDavitt texted the Nina daily for several days afterward. No replies came. He had no way of knowing whether his messages were getting through, whether the crew was reading them, whether anyone was still there to read them at all. Here is the part of the story that should have triggered an immediate emergency response, and did not. Nobody was looking for the Nina. The crew had not been able to send a mayday, and so the rescue authorities did not know anything was wrong. The Nina was simply on a long ocean passage, and long ocean passages take time, and a few days of silence from a boat crossing the Tasman is not, by itself, alarming. The people who loved the crew were waiting to hear that they had arrived safely in Australia. The rescue authorities had no reason to believe anything had happened. It was not until the 12th of June, more than a week after the last message, that family and friends of the crew, increasingly worried by the total silence, contacted the Rescue Coordination Centre New Zealand and reported the Nina overdue. Even then, the authorities calculated that the Nina should have reached Australia by around the 25th of June, and so the full aerial search did not begin in earnest until the boat had failed to arrive by that date. By the time aircraft were in the air searching for her, 3 weeks had passed since anyone had heard a word from the Nina. This delay is one of the quiet cruelties of the Nina's story. In the open ocean, the first hours after a disaster are everything. A life raft is most findable when it is closest to the last known position, before the currents have had days and weeks to scatter survivors across thousands of square miles. If the Nina had been carrying a beacon that automatically transmitted, or if a mayday had gotten out, rescuers could have been searching the right patch of ocean within hours. Instead, the system worked exactly as designed for a boat that was simply on a long passage. No alarm was raised because no alarm could be raised. The silence that should have screamed emergency instead looked from shore like an ordinary ocean crossing proceeding normally. By the time anyone understood that something was wrong, the window in which survivors might have been found had almost certainly already closed. The crew, if any of them survived the initial event, would have been adrift for weeks before the first search plane took off. The search, when it finally came, was enormous. It became one of the largest and most exhaustive search and rescue operations in the history of New Zealand. Royal New Zealand Air Force P-3 Orion aircraft, the long-range maritime patrol planes built for exactly this kind of work, flew sweep after sweep across the Tasman Sea. Helicopters searched the coastlines. Commercial fixed-wing aircraft joined in. Over the course of the operation, searchers covered an area variously reported as more than 600,000 and as much as 737,000 square nautical miles, an expanse of ocean more than 8 times the size of New Zealand itself. They used drift modeling to predict where a life raft might have been carried by the currents. They flew the predicted areas. They flew the coastlines where debris might wash ashore. They found nothing. Not a trace. No bodies. No life raft. No wreckage. No wood. No sails. No cushions. No life jackets. Nothing at all. An 85-year-old, 59-foot wooden schooner and 7 human beings had vanished from the surface of the Tasman Sea without leaving a single identifiable object behind. The search was suspended in early July. The Nina and everyone aboard her were presumed lost. What happened in the hours after that final undelivered message is something no one will ever know for certain, but the physical evidence, or rather the total absence of it, points toward a particular and terrible conclusion. The Nina was carrying a full suite of emergency equipment. She had an EPIRB, an emergency position indicating radio beacon, the device that, when activated, broadcasts a distress signal and a location to search and rescue satellites. She had a spot satellite personal tracker. She had a satellite phone, which they had been using. She had parachute flares. She had a VHF radio. She had every tool a crew needs to call for help in an emergency. Not one of them was ever used. No mayday came over the satellite phone or the VHF radio. No emergency signal came from the EPIRB or the spot tracker. The crew had been actively communicating by satellite phone right up until that final noon message, which means the phone worked and they knew how to use it. And yet when the end came, not a single one of those 4 emergency devices sent a signal. The conclusion that the rescue authorities reached, the only conclusion that fits the evidence, is that the Nina sank so quickly, in a single catastrophic event, that no one aboard had time to reach for a beacon, send a mayday, or activate a tracker. Whatever happened in seconds, or in the time it takes a wooden hull to fill with water and go down. There was no time to call for help. There was barely time, perhaps, to understand what was happening. What could do that to a boat? The Tasman Sea in a winter gale is capable of generating waves of extraordinary size and power, including rogue waves, single waves far larger than the surrounding seas that can appear without warning and overwhelm a vessel in an instant. A wooden schooner, 85 years old, however lovingly maintained, running under bare poles before a following sea in 50-knot winds, is in a precarious position. If she were caught by a large breaking wave from behind, she could be pitch-poled, flipped end over end, or rolled completely over, or driven bow first into the back of the wave ahead and simply buried. An old wooden hull subjected to those forces could open up, could lose her rig, could be holed, could capsize and not recover. Any of these could happen fast enough to give the crew no time to react. There is also the possibility, raised by experienced sailors who knew the boat, that the Nina's age was a factor, that a vessel built in 1928, even with replaced decks and frames, might have had structural vulnerabilities that gave way under the extreme loads of a Tasman gale. There is a precedent that haunts this theory. Other wooden schooners have been lost suddenly when their hulls simply opened up under stress. One well-known case involved a 61-foot wooden schooner whose hull opened without warning in only moderate conditions, sinking the boat within minutes, though her crew survived to be rescued. A wooden vessel is a living structure of thousands of fastened pieces, and under the right combination of age, load, and sea state, the connections between those pieces can let go all at once. If something like that happened to the Nina in a 50-knot gale, with 25-foot seas working her hull, she could have gone from sailing to sinking in the time it takes to register that the water is rising. That would explain everything. The lack of a mayday, the silent beacons, the absence of any debris large enough to spot, the totality of the disappearance. What could do that to a boat? The Tasman Sea in a winter gale is capable of generating waves of extraordinary size and power, including rogue waves, single waves far larger than the surrounding seas, that can appear without warning and overwhelm a vessel in an instant. A wooden schooner, 85 years old, however lovingly maintained, running under bare poles before a following sea in 50-knot winds, is in a precarious position. If she were caught by a large breaking wave from behind, she could be pitch-poled, flipped end over end, or rolled completely over, or driven bow first into the back of the wave ahead, and simply buried. An old wooden hull subjected to those forces could open up, could lose her rig, could be holed, could capsize and not recover. Any of these could happen fast enough to give the crew no time to react. There was one strange, fragile moment of hope, months after the search ended. In October of 2013, an American-based group using satellite imagery claimed to have spotted, in a satellite photo, an object the shape and size of the Nina, drifting in the ocean west of Norfolk Island. The families, who had never stopped searching on their own, organized and funded additional searches based on this and other tips. They hired aircraft. They scoured the areas the official search had not covered. They did everything that love and desperation could do. The satellite image came to nothing. 'No' 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 was never identified and never seen again. The hope it had raised slowly faded, and the families were left, in the end, exactly where they had started, with no boat, no bodies, and no answers. The loss of the Nina was the greatest loss of life in the history of recreational boating, and it struck a community of people who were, by any measure, experienced and competent. David Dyche was judged by the rescue authorities to be an experienced skipper, fully capable of handling the Nina in adverse conditions. Evi Nemeth was a seasoned ocean sailor, as well as a world-renowned scientist. These were not naive weekend boaters who wandered into danger. They were people who knew the Tasman Sea's reputation, who had prepared, who had a well-found and historic vessel, and who made the reasonable decisions that experienced sailors make. And it was not enough. The sea took them anyway, so completely and so quickly that the most sophisticated emergency equipment available never had the chance to send a single signal. The families of the crew have kept their memory alive. There are websites dedicated to documenting everything known about the Nina, the crew, the voyage, and the search. There are tributes to Evi Nemeth scattered across the world of computer science, where her textbooks are still used, and her name is still spoken with reverence by people who never knew she had died at sea. There is a photograph of the Nina under full sail, a beautiful old schooner heeling into the wind that has become the image people associate with the loss. Danielle Wright was 18. David Dyche, the fourth, was 17, on what was meant to be his last great adventure before college. They are all still out there, somewhere in the Tasman Sea, in water that gave back nothing. The last message said the storm sails were shredded, and the boat was down to bare poles, making 4 knots, heading 310 degrees, and that there would be an update at 6 p.m. It is an oddly comforting message, in its way. It is the message of a crew that was still functioning, still navigating, still planning the next check-in. It does not read like the final words of 7 people who were about to die. That is exactly what makes it so haunting. Somewhere between noon and 6 p.m. on the 4th of June, 2013, in the middle of one of the emptiest and most violent seas on Earth, something happened to the Nina that was fast enough and total enough that the 6 p.m. update was never sent, and no beacon was ever triggered, and no trace was ever found. The message that promised more was the last there ever was, and it was not even delivered until they were already gone. If you want to hear the stories of what else the sea has taken and never returned, subscribe. There's always another ship that never came home.